My name is Amanda Langford, and at my brother's engagement party, the bride-to-be laughed in my face and called me a peasant. Weeks later, I stood in her penthouse living room, opened a velvet pouch, and dropped our dead grandmother's stolen heirloom into her trembling hands, while the police catalogued the rest of her lies. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, and if you've ever been underestimated, you'll want to hear this. It was one of those Manhattan nights where everything sparkled: crystal chandeliers, polished champagne flutes, sequin gowns, and intentions dressed in diamonds. The Langford Grand Hotel ballroom was brimming with family, society friends, and way too many photographers. I stepped out of the elevator onto the gold-trimmed mezzanine in a sapphire dress that shimmered like calm water under moonlight. My heels clicked across the marble floor like punctuation, marks on a sentence I was ready to end. A waiter held the door open, and I entered the room just as the DJ queued up some forgettable love song. At the far end, my brother Caleb stood on a raised platform, hand in hand with his glowing fiancée, Madison Fairchild. Blonde, beaming, barely blinking from all the flashing cameras. She looked up and saw me. "Oh," Madison said, feigning surprise with a voice dripping sugar, "you made it." I was still halfway through the crowd when she started walking toward me, her champagne glass poised just so. Her dress clung like wet velvet, and her fake warmth barely covered the blade she'd sharpened just for me. "Brave of you to come," she said in a stage whisper. "Then again, I suppose even neglected peasants need to see what luxury looks like." My spine stiffened. A few heads turned. Someone nearby actually chuckled. "Careful, Madison," I said softly. "You might want to start getting used to humility." She leaned in, smiling for the camera beside us. "You don't belong here, Amanda. You're a sad little side character in a family that already forgot you." I looked around. Champagne flowed. Laughter bloomed. I saw my mother sipping rosé with Madison's stepfather and my father, Robert Langford, posing with a local news anchor like this was his coronation. My brother was laughing, genuinely, his arm still around Madison's waist. I walked past her, straight to the DJ table. "Excuse me," I said, bending toward the mic. The music sputtered into silence, feedback whining for a second before settling. "Hi, I know you weren't expecting me to speak tonight," I began. "But since this is my hotel, I figured I could steal a moment." A slow ripple moved through the room, first curiosity, then confusion, and finally alarm. Madison's face froze. Caleb stepped forward, uncertain. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming," I said, smiling calmly. "And I sincerely hope you enjoyed the free drinks, courtesy of the Langford family. But unfortunately, the party is over." A gasp rippled through the guests. Cameras tilted. My father's drink paused midway to his mouth. I turned to the head of the hotel's security, who had just arrived at my cue. "Robert, please begin escorting the guests to the exit. Staff, please begin cleanup, effective immediately." "Understood, Miss Langford," he said, already moving. "You can't do this," Madison hissed, stepping up beside me, cheeks flushed with fury. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said, tilting my head. "I'm just correcting a mistake." The ballroom exploded into quiet chaos. Murmurs, questions, the shuffle of designer heels on marble as guests slowly began filing out. My mother's face was pale. Caleb just stared at me. I turned my back on all of them, because tonight wasn't about causing a scene. It was about starting something. Something Madison wasn't ready for. Upstairs in the Langford Grand's private penthouse lounge, everything was glass, steel, and polished tension. The skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside, the mood was icier than a January frostbite. I stood by the marble-topped bar, watching the reflection of my family flicker in the window as they filed in behind me, my mother in her pale gold gown, arms stiff at her sides, my father jaw tight and eyes smoldering, and Caleb, whose expression I couldn't quite read yet. Madison wasn't there. I was grateful for that. "I can't believe you did that," Caleb started, voice quiet but sharp. "You embarrassed everyone, in front of press, clients, our entire extended family." I turned to face him slowly. "You think I embarrassed you, after what she said to me in your hotel at your engagement party?" My mother stepped in like a rehearsed actress hitting her cue. "You made it about yourself, as always." She crossed the room, heels snapping like accusations. "We gave you space, Amanda. We gave you time to fix whatever it is that's wrong in your life, and tonight was supposed to be about Caleb." I laughed, short and bitter. "Fix what's wrong in my life?" You mean being the only one who sees what Madison really is? Oh, here we go again, my father muttered, rubbing his temple. The Amanda Crusade, always looking for villains. Caleb spoke again, more subdued now. Madison told me you've never liked her, that you've been cold and judgmental from the start. She called me a peasant, Caleb, a neglected peasant, in front of everyone. His brow furrowed. She wouldn't say that. She did, I said simply. Looked me in the eye and said I didn't belong. My mother rolled her eyes with such force I thought she'd sprain something. Well, that's rich, considering you haven't belonged at family functions for months. We invite you, you decline. You miss birthdays, holidays, and now you think you have the right to ruin the one celebration that wasn't about you. I inhaled slowly, keeping my voice even. Because she's hiding something, and I'm not going to let you all be dragged into a trap. Stop it, my father snapped. Enough with the drama. You think because you own some property now you get to dictate everything. Some property? I blinked. I rebuilt this hotel from the ground up after it nearly went under in 2020, and tonight I was mocked in my own building. That's not drama, that's personal. Mother's voice went low, venomous. You're just jealous, I blinked. Jealous. Your life is empty, she said, stepping forward until we were nearly nose to nose. You have no partner, no children, no stability. And now your younger brother is getting everything you can't seem to keep: love, family, respect. You can't stand not being the golden one anymore. The words hit like a slap, but I stood my ground. I looked at her, at the mother who used to braid my hair before debate club competitions, who once told me I'd light the world on fire, and I saw nothing left of her in that face. I've never been more full, I said, my voice calm, my hands trembling only slightly at my sides. Not with money, not with titles, with truth, she scoffed. I turned to Caleb. You're my brother, I love you, but I'm not going to stand by while you walk into something dangerous. Dangerous, he said, disbelief coating the word. You'll see, I whispered, sooner than you think. I walked toward the elevator. As the doors began to close behind me, I heard my father's voice echo from across the lounge. You're no longer part of this family. The doors shut with a soft hiss. I didn't cry. Not then. I stood in that cold, mirrored elevator and stared at myself. My sapphire dress flawless, my lipstick still perfect, and my heart in pieces. But the truth, it was still mine. The next morning, Tribeca was unusually quiet. My office overlooked a narrow cobblestone street where the cafes hadn't yet spilled out with their usual chaos. The stillness outside didn't match the tension that buzzed under my skin. I stood by the window, arms folded, watching a delivery truck reverse into the loading zone across the street. My assistant, Corrine, tiptoed in behind me. There's someone here to see you, she said. She didn't have an appointment, but she walked straight past security. I didn't need a name, I already knew. Let her in, I said without turning around. The door slammed open with theatrical flair. Madison, of course. She strode in like she owned the place, perfect curls, perfect heels, perfect fury pulsing behind her eyes. No camera flash this time, just venom and raw intent. I turned to face her. She didn't wait. How does it feel, she began, to be unwanted trash in a fancy dress? You ruined your own brother's engagement and confirmed exactly what everyone already thinks: you're bitter, you're lonely, and you're desperate for relevance. I let the silence stretch between us. Her hands were trembling, but her mouth kept going. You think owning a hotel and hiding behind a trust fund makes you powerful? Please, you're still that overlooked little girl who couldn't stand to see her baby brother be loved. I took a step forward slowly, like I was walking through fire barefoot and felt none of the heat. I'd rather be alone with integrity, I said, than surrounded by people who build their lives on lies. Madison snorted. Oh, that's rich coming from you. You're obsessed with appearances. Image, perfection, you and I both know you're no better than anyone else. I'm a lot of things, Madison, I said, voice quiet and steady, but I've never needed to steal someone's legacy to feel valuable. Her face twitched. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, I replied. You play sweet for Caleb, but you've got claws under that manicure. I've seen it. I felt it last night. And for what it's worth, your mask slipped. In public. She laughed bitterly. No one will believe your version of anything. You burned every bridge last night. Your own father disowned you in a ballroom. I'd rather be disowned than deceived, I said, stepping back. But that's the difference between us, isn't it? You lie to protect your image. I expose the truth, even when it hurts. Madison's expression cracked just for a second, a flicker of something raw, shame maybe, or fear. I lifted my hand. Corrine, I said toward the door, calm as silk. Call security. Madison straightened, rage morphing into arrogance again. You're making a mistake, she said, chin lifting. You have no idea who I really am. You're right, I said, eyes never leaving hers. But I'm about to find out. Two uniformed guards appeared at the doorway. She didn't resist. She turned and walked out with slow, deliberate steps, but not before looking over her shoulder. One day, she said coldly, you'll regret choosing war. I smiled. Only if I lose. The door shut behind her with a satisfying click. I stood there for a moment, letting the room fall silent again. Then I crossed to my desk, opened my laptop, and typed a name into the search bar. Drew Halston, private investigator. 3 weeks later, the wedding played on a 70-inch screen in my Tribeca penthouse, sharp enough to show every fake smile and every shimmer of imported crystal. I sat curled into one corner of my velvet couch, barefoot in silk pajamas, nursing a glass of wine I hadn't sipped in 20 minutes. Layla sat beside me, legs folded under her, holding a bowl of popcorn like we were watching a rom-com. Only this wasn't fiction. It was my brother's wedding, and I hadn't even received an invitation. The Luxury Lifestyle Channel was doing a full segment on New York's hottest winter wedding. A snow-dusted manor upstate, designer everything, a drone sweeping over the scene like we were watching royalty wed. There's Caleb, Layla said, pointing to the screen. God, he looks trapped, I finished. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. Madison appeared next, stepping out of a vintage Rolls in a gown so tight it looked like a second skin. Her hair was impossibly perfect. Her expression, pure pageant queen. They didn't even invite me, I muttered, setting the untouched wine on the coffee table. Card, not a text, nothing. Layla turned to me. I'm sorry, that's a different level of cold. It's not just cold, it's war, I whispered. And I think they all think I'm done, that I got embarrassed, said my piece, and vanished back into my tower like a crazy woman in a fairy tale. Layla tilted her head. Okay, pause, I looked at her. You're Amanda Langford, she said, pointing a popcorn kernel at me like a dagger. You don't get erased from the narrative, you write the damn narrative. I blinked, caught off guard. And let's talk about this for a second, she continued, waving toward the screen. That woman insulted you publicly in your own hotel. She's now married to your brother and no one even checked on you. Nope, I leaned back. Not a single family member, not even a text saying, hope you're okay. I was just, edited out. Layla stared at me for a long moment. So what now? I didn't answer right away. The screen showed them saying vows, Caleb's voice slightly shaky as he slipped a ring on her finger. She's hiding something, I said finally. I don't know what yet, but I know that look. She's always been too polished, too curated. You don't have a life that clean without some mud under your nails. Layla smiled slowly. That's the Amanda I know. I've been quiet. I let them spin the story, bitter sister, jealous, unstable. I gave them space to come to their senses. I exhaled. They didn't. Layla set the popcorn down and leaned in. Then stop waiting, find out who she really is. I looked at her. I already started, I said softly. Private investigator, discreet, talented. Her eyes lit up. Of course you did, what's his name? Drew Halston. I haven't heard back yet, but when I do. I paused, watching Madison on screen as she kissed Caleb in front of a glittering crowd. I'm not going to let this end with her winning. Layla raised her glass. To the truth. I clinked mine against hers. To the cracks. As the segment faded out to a montage of designer gowns and dramatic music, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Focus. Purpose. Not just revenge but clarity. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was preparing. The Café Verbena in Brooklyn was tucked between a vintage bookstore and a locksmith shop, a quiet nook that smelled like fresh cardamom and old brick. The kind of place no one would ever expect an heiress to meet a private investigator. But that was precisely why I picked it. I sat at a back table, half hidden behind a sprawling potted plant, sipping black tea with a slice of orange. My nerves buzzed under my skin, but I kept my posture composed, straight back, steady breath. I'd been trained from a young age to look calm, even when the floor was cracking beneath my feet. At exactly 2:00 p.m., Drew Halston walked in. He hadn't changed. Tall, sharp-eyed, and infuriatingly relaxed. His leather jacket looked worn in the good way, like it held stories I hadn't earned the right to hear yet. He scanned the cafe once, caught my eye, and smirked like we were picking up an old chess game. Langford, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Didn't think I'd hear from you again. Neither did I said, sliding a folder toward him. But here we are. He glanced down, saw the name Madison Fairchild printed at the top in bold. "Ah," he said, "the bride." "The problem," I corrected. He raised an eyebrow. "Tell me." I took a moment before speaking. "She's not who she says she is. I can't prove it yet, but something about her story, the background, the education, the family, none of it holds. It's too clean, too rehearsed." Drew leaned back, tapping the folder. "You think she's using your brother. I know she is, I just don't have receipts. You want me to dig? Deep, discreet, and thorough." I paused. "I need to know who she really is before she rewrites herself into my family's will." He grinned. "You always had a flair for drama. And you always delivered results," I replied. "Still good at what you do." "Better," he said. "Give me a few days." I nodded. "I'll be waiting." We didn't shake hands when we parted. Just a mutual nod, transactional but familiar. Drew disappeared into the Brooklyn afternoon, and I went home feeling something almost like hope. 3 days later, my phone buzzed just after sunset. I was in my study, a half-read memoir in my lap and a fire crackling low behind me. Drew's name lit up the screen. I answered on the first ring. "Talk," I said. "Well," he began, drawling it out like he'd been waiting all day to say it, "your future sister-in-law is a bit of a collector." "Of what?" "Identities," he replied, his voice low, amused. "She's had at least 4 aliases in the last 8 years. 2 of them with legally registered names, one tied to a suspended cosmetology license in Michigan, another used to open a joint account with a man named Cole Renner in Arizona, who, by the way, filed a police report in 2019 for fraud and disappeared shortly after." I stood up slowly, the book falling to the rug unnoticed. "Are you sure? Deeply buried," he said. "But not enough. And Amanda, this woman has done this before. The setups, the charm, the quick access to someone's money or name, and then she ghosts. I can't trace every victim yet, but it's a pattern. Your brother's just the next one." My pulse roared in my ears. "And she's about to inherit Langford money." "Unless you stop her," he said simply. I walked to the window, looking out at the city I loved, brilliant, ruthless, unblinking. "Email me everything," I said. "I already did. Check your inbox." As I opened my laptop, Drew added, "And Amanda. Be careful, people like Madison, they don't go down quietly." I clicked the email. There it was, scans, photos, timelines. A full portrait of Madison Fairchild, no, Marissa Keene, no, Talia Rowan, so many names, so many stories, all coming undone now. "Thanks, Drew," I whispered. "This is how we start." 2 days after Drew's call, I was back in my office at the Langford Grand, watching the sun slice through the high-rise windows like judgment. The room was silent except for the subtle hum of the surveillance playback. Across from me, Julian Patel, my hotel's general manager for the past 7 years, and one of the few people I trusted implicitly, sat with a remote in hand, fast-forwarding through footage from the executive suite where Madison and Caleb had stayed 2 weeks before their wedding. "This is the morning after the engagement party," Julian said, pausing the footage. "I flagged it because housekeeping logged some irregularities, missing linens, minibar overages, odd trash left behind." I leaned forward as the image stilled on Madison standing near the marble vanity in a silk robe alone. Her hair was half-pinned, her phone on speaker though the audio was muted. She didn't look distraught or hurried. She looked comfortable, like someone playing house. Julian hit play. Madison turned toward the bathroom, pulled 2 embroidered Langford Grand towels from the rack, our signature white ones with the deep blue stitching, and without hesitation, folded them neatly and slid them into her oversized Dior tote. Another towel followed, then a robe. She even looked into the mirror, fixed her lipstick, and smirked at herself before walking out of the suite with a latte in hand. Julian clicked pause again. We both stared at the frozen image. "She stole from my hotel," I said, keeping my voice even. "Towels," Julian said with a long exhale. "Seriously, she's stealing towels from the hotel she's marrying into." "She's not marrying into anything," I replied, straightening in my chair. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Julian turned to look at me. "Amanda, I know you've had issues with her, but this isn't exactly felony behavior. Guests take towels all the time." I met his gaze. "And when my family does it, I call it tacky. But when a woman with 4 aliases and a fraud complaint in Arizona does it," I tapped the screen. "That's a crack in a carefully curated image. You don't start with stealing jewelry, you start small, towels, robes, what you can get away with." He didn't argue. "And she didn't take them by accident," I continued. She knew what she was doing, no hesitation, it was entitlement. Julian sat back, fingers steepled. You're building a case. I'm proving a pattern, I corrected. And I'm not doing it with rumors or bad feelings. I'm doing it piece by piece. Let me guess, he said, half smiling. There's more. I turned my laptop screen toward him and clicked open a folder. Names, dates, screen captures. A still image of Madison with darker hair standing next to a man labeled Cole Renner. An ID with a different surname. Screenshots from Drew's report, backgrounds that didn't line up. She's a professional, I said quietly. But not careful enough. Julian leaned in to read. She used a fake name to open a joint bank account. 3 years ago, then vanished. He let out a long breath. Okay, I see what you're doing now. She targeted Caleb, I said. Not for love, for legacy, for money, for access. And she's good at it, convincing, clean, and photogenic. Julian looked back at the paused video. And arrogant. Exactly, I said, narrowing my eyes at the frozen image. She underestimates everyone, including me. We sat in silence for a few moments, watching Madison smirk from the screen. Save that file, I said. Lock it up, Julian nodded. And if you need backup when the time comes, I'm in. That meant something. Julian had worked for our family since before Caleb and I were teenagers. He'd seen us grow up, seen our father take pride in appearances, our mother host galas like she was auditioning for royalty. And now he was sitting here taking my side. When he left, I closed the surveillance footage, but not the moment. Madison's smirk lingered in my mind like a warning, or a dare. This wasn't about stolen towels, it was about patterns. Psychology, pressure. People like Madison always slipped eventually. I just needed to make sure there was a net when she did. The precinct smelled like old paper, burnt coffee, and air freshener trying too hard to be citrus. I sat on a scuffed metal chair across from Officer Lynn Crawford, a longtime acquaintance from my short-lived community outreach days. She'd once taught a self-defense class I sponsored. Tough, smart, and allergic to nonsense. I liked her immediately. She leaned back in her chair, hair pulled into a frizzy bun, badge clipped askew on her vest. Her fingers drummed lightly on the desk while I finished laying out the folder. Printed screenshots, surveillance stills, Drew's summary, and a USB drive labeled Langford Grand, Suite 903 Jan 7. Lynn picked up the drive and raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, it's not wedding footage. Depends on your taste, I said. She chuckled and plugged it into her desktop. As the footage loaded, she glanced over the paperwork I'd provided, her lips pursed. I waited, hands folded, heart steady. I wasn't nervous anymore, I was building a case. The footage began playing Madison in her silk robe, casual, confident, slipping hotel towels into her bag like she was choosing macaroons at a brunch buffet. Lynn blinked, then leaned closer. When the robe joined the towels in the tote, Lynn let out a single, sharp laugh. Oh my God, she said, this chick is boosting towels from your own hotel. Yes. The hotel she's marrying into. That's the one. She leaned back, grinning. Towels might just unravel the whole damn show. I allowed myself a small smile. Exactly, it's not about towels, it's about the arrogance. Lynn clicked through the stills. She didn't hesitate, that's what gets me, like she's done it 100 times before. She has, I said, tapping the summary. 4 aliases, 1 fraud complaint filed by a former partner, false addresses, stolen IDs. She's a ghost who keeps resurfacing in pearls and private clubs. Lynn whistled. And your brother married her, I nodded. Girl, she muttered, shaking her head, your family must be neck-deep in denial. They are, I said flatly, but denial doesn't stop consequences. Lynn flipped to the last page of Drew's file. Her smile faded into something sharper. These identities are legit, the fingerprints well buried but traceable, she's good but not perfect. And you know what gets women like her caught? Impulse, I said, she grinned. Petty theft, always. It's not the fake name or the offshore account, it's the damn towels. We sat in silence for a moment, then Lynn reached for her phone. I can't promise anything official, not yet, but I'll talk to our fraud unit, quietly. We've got a guy who eats identity theft for breakfast. I exhaled slowly. That's all I need right now. I'm not looking for a circus. I want a case, something real, something that holds. Lynn nodded. Well, you've got to start, and honestly. You've done more legwork than most detectives do in a month. I've had motivation, she looked up. And what's that? I met her eyes. I'm not going to let my brother be the next man she drains and disappears from, not on my watch. Lynn smiled again, but there was something different this time, respect. You know, she said, I had you pegged all wrong. I thought you were the hotel princess. Polished, controlled, unreachable. I am all those things, I said, rising from my chair. But I'm also the one who pays attention when everyone else is looking the other way. Lynn stood too. I'll call you in a few days, once I know more. I'll be ready. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Amanda, yes, good work. That stayed with me as I walked out of the precinct and into the crisp late winter air. No applause, no fanfare, just the steady hum of a woman who knew she was closing in on the truth. Madison wanted a quiet little scam. But she underestimated two things: the surveillance system at the Langford Grand, and me. Dinner was already uncomfortable before the first knock. The dining room in Caleb and Madison's pristine Upper East Side apartment was magazine-perfect. Monochrome table settings, brushed gold flatware, wine so expensive it made my teeth ache. But the air, tense. Every conversation felt rehearsed, each laugh a little too sharp at the edges. I sat at the end of the table, a guest only in theory. Across from me, my mother fussed with her napkin like it had personally offended her. My father sipped his wine in silence. Caleb carved the duck with surgical precision, trying to keep the peace. And Madison, she glowed like a hostess in her prime, too perfect, too calm. She raised her glass with a soft smile. To new beginnings, she said sweetly. To expensive delusions, I muttered into my water. Caleb shot me a warning look, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't here to be gracious. I was here because Lynn had called earlier that afternoon with one word: tonight. Family dinner, I'd told her. All of them in one place. Even better, she'd replied. We'll knock at 7 sharp. Now it was 6:59, and my appetite was non-existent. I must say, Madison continued, her voice syrupy, it's nice to all be together again. After everything. She cast me a brief glance, then turned her attention back to her wine. Such a shame you missed the wedding, my mother chimed in, not bothering to hide her edge. But I suppose it gave everyone space to breathe. I was busy, I said, uncovering fraud mostly. Caleb dropped his fork. Madison laughed too brightly. Oh, Amanda, you do know how to kill a mood. Then came the knock, 3 sharp raps, no one moved. Are you expecting someone? My father asked Caleb. No, Caleb said slowly, standing. I'll get it. He barely reached the entryway before the second knock came, heavier this time, followed by the unmistakable shuffle of movement behind the door. Caleb opened it, and the hallway filled with uniforms. Caleb Langford? Asked a tall officer, holding up a folded piece of paper. We have a warrant to search the premises. What? Madison called from the dining room, already standing. What's going on? Received credible information about items on the property linked to prior cases of identity fraud and theft, the officer said as more units entered. Step aside, sir. Of course, Caleb stammered, stepping back. The officers flowed in like a tide. Calm, professional, no yelling, no drama, just silent, coordinated movement as they fanned out across the apartment. Drawers opened. Closet doors pulled back. Storage bins examined. Madison stood frozen, hands at her sides, knuckles white. My mother rose from her seat, indignant. This is outrageous, we're having dinner. Sit down, Alina, I said coolly, standing. They're just getting started. She turned, eyes wide. You knew. I requested it, I replied. You brought police into your brother's home, my father barked, standing. No, I said, stepping into the hallway where Caleb stood speechless. I brought truth into it. Madison's face had gone pale. She stepped toward one of the officers, voice shaking. This is a mistake, a huge mistake. You can't just barge in and— We have a warrant, ma'am, the officer said without looking up. In the living room, a detective called out, found something. Every head turned. Madison didn't. She stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on me like I was the one holding the gun. I didn't speak, I didn't smile, I just watched. Because for weeks she'd danced through my family, unbothered and unbotherable. But tonight, the dance was over. The hallway outside Caleb and Madison's apartment was lined with family portraits, framed smiles, carefully lit vacation shots, candid moments that never told the whole truth. I leaned against the cool wall, arms crossed, listening to drawers opening, officers murmuring, Madison's heels pacing like a ticking clock in the next room. Then came the footsteps. Sharp, furious. My mother appeared first, silk shawl flaring behind her like a cape of wounded pride. My father followed, slower but no less thunderous. How dare you, she hissed, eyes blazing. Not here to debate manners, mother, I said, not moving. You humiliated this family, she snapped. You've turned Caleb's home into a spectacle, police tearing through closets, barking questions, rifling through our things like we're criminals. I met her glare, steady as stone. I didn't humiliate this family, I protected it. My father stepped forward, voice like gravel. By staging a raid. This wasn't staged, I replied. It was overdue. They stared at me like I'd grown horns, like they couldn't fathom I'd be capable of such defiance. Not Amanda, the overachiever, the polished Langford child who kept her mouth shut and her heels higher than her standards. She stole from my hotel, I said calmly. Towels, my mother scoffed. You brought the police over towels. No, I said, pushing off the wall. That was just the start. I walked past them into the living room. Madison was sitting now on the edge of the ivory area rug, arms wrapped around herself, face the color of chalk. Her eyes darted to the hallway like she might still try to bolt. An officer stood behind her, holding a small velvet pouch. It looked harmless, dainty, elegant, something you tuck into a clutch, but I recognized it instantly. It had belonged to our grandmother. I turned to the rest of the room. She didn't just take towels. From my bag, I pulled out a thin folder, cream-colored. No logos, just wait. Let's talk about the aliases. I opened it. Madison Fairchild, I read aloud. Also known as Marissa Keene, Talia Rowan, Janelle Brooks, and for 2 glorious months in Reno, Danielle Mace. Caleb blinked, unmoving. She opened a fraudulent joint account in Arizona with a man who later disappeared, I continued. She used someone else's social security number in Michigan to apply for a cosmetology license. And in Nevada, she was charged, convicted for wire fraud under a different name. I turned the file around and handed it to Caleb. He took it. He flipped through it, and his hands began to shake. No, he said softly. This can't be. She told me her name used to be Madison Cole. She said she changed it after a family fallout. Which family? I asked. The one in Scottsdale, the one in Reno, or the one that never existed? Madison didn't speak. She looked like a cracked statue, face blank, lips parted as if sound might escape but never form words. My mother tried again, though her voice was wobbling now. That doesn't mean any of it's true. Anyone can print a file and make accusations. I turned to her slowly. Then ask Officer Torres, I said, nodding to the officer still holding the pouch. He ran the fingerprints. He pulled the Nevada file. These aren't just claims, they're facts. A long pause. The kind that changes a room. Finally, my father spoke, barely above a whisper. How did we not see this? I looked at him. Because you didn't want to. No one said anything after that. No one moved, until Caleb dropped the folder onto the table like it had burned his hands. He turned to Madison. You told me you loved me, he said. Madison blinked finally. I do, she whispered. I had to lie. You wouldn't have looked at me if you knew. I wouldn't have trusted you, he cut in. And now I know why. The air was thick with realization. Not rage yet, just devastation. The kind that roots itself deep, slow, and permanent. And me, I stood quietly in the center of it all. Not gloating, not triumphant, just vindicated. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the only one who'd been awake the whole time. The hush in the apartment was heavy, like a breath held too long, waiting to break. Then from the far end of the living room, a detective's voice sliced through the stillness. You'll want to see this. We all turned. Detective Rowan, compact, no nonsense, and far too calm for the chaos unfolding, stood near the antique console table by the window. In her gloved hands, she held a small velvet pouch, no bigger than a palm, the drawstrings slightly frayed. My heart dropped before she even opened it, because I knew that pouch. It had lived in my grandmother Evelyn Langford's jewelry box since I was a child. I remembered tracing its gold embroidery with sticky fingers, begging to wear the princess earrings when she hosted family tea parties. She'd laugh and say, "When you're older, darling, family jewels wait for worthy ears." And now here it was, in the hands of a detective, inside Madison's apartment. Detective Rowan pulled the string and let the contents spill gently into her palm, 2 antique sapphire and pearl earrings and a delicate gold locket, worn smooth from time and love. The room seemed to contract, every molecule snapping tighter. Caleb's breath caught. No, he said, stepping forward. I never gave her these. Madison stood, but slowly now, her face had lost all color. Caleb, I never gave you these, he repeated, louder this time. She began, voice thin, desperate. I didn't steal them, I didn't mean to, I found them in that old box from your mother's place. They were in the drawer with the winter scarves. I thought no one would notice. I just wanted to look good, okay, in front of your family. I thought if I wore something meaningful. You wore them, I interrupted, my voice low. She turned toward me like I'd physically struck her. It wasn't about money, I swear, I wanted to belong. You wanted to belong, I repeated slowly, stepping closer. So you stole from our grandmother, from the woman who built this family when we had nothing, who gave me those earrings on my 15th birthday and told me they were mine to pass down one day. I didn't know they were yours, she whispered. You knew they weren't yours, I replied coldly. She looked around, wild-eyed now. I thought if I wore them, your mother would accept me faster. I thought they'd believe I was one of you. You're not, Caleb said. She turned toward him, panicked. Please don't say that. You don't understand. I had nothing growing up. I had to fight for everything. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I love you. Caleb, I love you. He stared at the heirlooms in the detective's hand like they were suddenly foreign. His voice cracked when he said, You don't take what's sacred and twist it for your benefit. Madison's shoulders sagged. Her lip trembled, but I couldn't soften. Not now. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate. The pouch now sat open on the table. The locket winked in the lamplight. You didn't just steal jewelry, I said. You stole trust, history, bloodline. These were more than objects, Madison, they were ours. She finally sat back down, trembling, fingers clawed into the couch cushions, her perfect image cracking. And there, for the first time, was no comeback. No charm, no defense, just silence. The courtroom smelled like nerves and wood polish. Weeks had passed since that night in the apartment, but the silence from my family afterward had said everything: shame, grief, guilt. They hadn't tried to defend her again. Not once. Not even my mother. And now we were here. The case had moved faster than expected. Drew's documentation, the recovered heirlooms, and Madison's laundry list of old identities made things difficult to ignore, especially once Nevada confirmed her prior conviction. She sat across the aisle from me now at the defense table, dressed in modest gray, her glossy curls tamed into something almost penitential. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, lips moving slightly as though whispering prayers to herself. But it was too late for prayers. Caleb sat beside me, hunched forward, eyes glassy. It had taken him weeks to face me, and even then, all he could manage at first was, tell me everything I missed. I did. Today, he hadn't said a word since we arrived. His knee bounced restlessly under the bench. All rise, the bailiff called. The judge entered, a small woman with an unflinching stare and a reputation for smelling dishonesty before it even stepped into the courtroom. She didn't waste time. After review of the evidence and prior convictions, I'm granting a suspended sentence with a 5-year probationary period. You will report to a court-appointed supervisor weekly and submit to regular monitoring. Any further offenses will result in immediate sentencing. The gavel hit the wood. One sharp, irreversible sound. Madison crumpled. I'm sorry, she choked out suddenly, sobbing as the courtroom emptied around her. I'm so sorry. She didn't direct it at the judge or her attorney. She looked straight at Caleb. I just wanted to be loved, she cried. I never meant to hurt anyone. But Caleb didn't speak. He didn't even move. I rose quietly, smoothing my coat, and gathered my bag. As I turned to leave, I felt a hand brush mine. Caleb, his eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, locked onto mine with the weight of years. I was blind, he whispered. So blind, I saw the signs and still. I let her in, I pushed you out. Amanda, I'm so sorry. I placed a hand gently on his shoulder the way I used to when he scraped his knees as a kid. The hurt was bigger now, deeper. But some comforts didn't change. I didn't need you to believe me, I said softly. I just needed the truth to come out. He closed his eyes, and I left him there, still, stunned, unraveling everything he'd chosen to ignore. The marble floors echoed with every step I took toward the exit, each click of my heels sharp and final, like punctuation to a sentence I'd waited my whole life to finish. As the courthouse doors swung open, cameras flashed. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just kept walking. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. 3 months later, we sat around the old mahogany dining table in my parents' house in Connecticut, once the throne room of every Langford holiday, now a place that felt a little smaller, a little softer. The same chandelier hung above us. The same china clinked on the same ivory tablecloth, but everything else had shifted, especially them. My mother, once regal and sharp-tongued, seemed quieter now. There was a tremble in her hands I'd never seen before. My father looked older too, like the weight of disbelief had finally caught up to him, or maybe it was the shame, but no one had run from this dinner. Caleb was the one who invited me, and he was the one who broke the silence. I filed the divorce papers last week, he said, voice low but steady. It's official. The words hung in the air like soft thunder. No gasps, no tears, just a shared, exhaled truth. I didn't come here to relive it, he added, glancing at me. I came to say thank you. My fork paused midair. He looked across the table, eyes finding mine. You were the only one who saw clearly, even when the rest of us didn't want to, especially me. I set the fork down. You didn't want to lose her, I said gently. I didn't want to believe I could be that wrong, he replied. Turns out, I was. There was a pause, and then my mother cleared her throat. Not her usual sharp, listen to me sound, this was something else. Your father and I, she began, faltering. We owe you an apology too, I blinked. We dismissed you, she continued, eyes glossy. We called you bitter, jealous, empty, and all the while you were the only one protecting us. My father nodded beside her, his voice rough. You saved this family from something we didn't have the strength to see. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. I wasn't trying to win, I said. I just couldn't watch her rewrite who we were. Caleb reached for his glass, raised it. To Amanda, he said. To her spine of steel and eyes sharper than any of ours. My mother followed suit, then my father. I hesitated, then lifted mine too. To Truth, I said, even when it hurts. We clinked glasses softly, awkwardly. The room didn't erupt in laughter. No one burst into tears of reconciliation. But something subtle shifted. For the first time in what felt like forever, we were 4 people sitting at the same table not pretending. The dinner carried on with roasted vegetables, warm rolls, and easier conversation. Caleb asked about the hotel. My father shared an embarrassing story from his college days, and even my mother let out an unfiltered laugh. No one mentioned Madison's name, and that silence was its own kind of peace. Later, as we cleared dishes and sunlight faded over the snow-dusted lawn, my mother paused beside me in the kitchen. You've always been strong, she said softly. But this time, you were right, and brave. And we should have seen it sooner. I didn't say anything at first, just nodded. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need a grand speech, just space. And time, and a seat at the table again. The Langford backyard hadn't changed much in the past year, still perfectly trimmed hedges, Adirondack chairs set out in a polite semicircle, and my father obsessively tending the grill like it was a prized stock portfolio. But the energy, that had shifted completely. It was the first warm day of June. Breezes moved lazily through the tall oaks, and sunlight flickered off mason jars filled with lemonade and slices of strawberry. Cousins laughed near the pool. A toddler screamed joyfully chasing a dog with a hot dog bun. It felt normal, not performative, not curated, just ordinary in the best possible way. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just passing through the margins of my family, I was part of it again. I was standing near the outdoor cooler, glass of rosé in hand, when Caleb appeared behind me. You got a minute? He asked. I turned. Always. He looked different, lighter, in a way I hadn't seen since before Madison. Less haunted, less guarded. There's someone I want you to meet, he said, then stepped aside slightly. A woman with sun-kissed skin and kind eyes stepped forward, smiling warmly. This is Elise, he said. We've been seeing each other for a few months. Elise stepped right into my space, arms out. I hope it's okay that I'm hugging you, she said. Before I could respond, I was wrapped in soft denim and vanilla-scented warmth. He told me everything, she murmured as she hugged me. About the wedding, the trial, all of it, thank you for saving him. I pulled back slightly, studying her face. There was no pretension, no calculation, just sincerity. You're welcome, I said softly. Just take care of each other. Elise nodded. That's the plan. Caleb slipped his arm around her shoulder, and the two of them moved toward the lawn, blending into the gentle noise of clinking glasses and shouted card games. I watched them go, feeling something settle in my chest. Not closure exactly, but peace. A few feet away, my mother handed a tray of burgers to my father, who shockingly took it without grumbling. She caught my eye and smiled, a real one this time, not the polished socialite grin, but something deeper, something that said, I see you now. I smiled back. Later, as twilight brushed the sky with lavender and the grill cooled to a faint glow, I sat at the edge of the porch with my sandals off, toes in the grass. Layla, who'd driven in just for the afternoon, leaned against the rail beside me. "Well," she said, "you pulled off the ultimate plot twist." I laughed, the sound surprising even me. "You mean surviving my own family saga?" "That," she said, bumping my shoulder, "and proving a con artist wrong without ever sinking to her level." We sat in companionable silence, listening to the wind, the music, the clinking of bottles, and laughter that no longer sounded rehearsed. A year ago I had walked out of a courtroom alone. Now I sat surrounded by a family that was still flawed, still healing, but present. And I was no longer on the outside. Not bitter, not broken, just Amanda Langford again. And this time on my terms.